What would you do if you discovered your husband betrayed you in the most unimaginable way, with your own daughter? How would you handle such a devastating situation to protect not only your life but also your daughter's future? And what would you do if you had the power to bring change to people's lives despite the pain you've endured? In this gripping tale, we delved into Ruth's life, a story of heartbreak, resilience, and courage. Her journey reminds us that even in the face of the darkest betrayals, we hold the power to heal, protect, and create a brighter future. The choices we make in our most difficult moments can define who we are and pave the way for redemption and strength. The question remains, how would you write the next chapter of your story? Ruth stood in her sunlit kitchen, humming softly as she brewed her morning coffee. Her life seemed picture-perfect: a devoted husband, James, who never missed an anniversary, and a bright, talented daughter, Queen, who was preparing for college. It was the kind of life others envied, one that Ruth herself felt grateful for every day. But lately, subtle cracks had started to appear in the perfect facade. James had been unusually distracted, his phone constantly in hand, buzzing with notifications he didn't bother to explain. Queen, once bubbly and talkative, now spent hours locked in her room, offering only curt, monosyllabic answers to Ruth's questions. Ruth dismissed these changes as typical family ups and downs, brushing off the nagging feeling that something was amiss. As she finished her coffee, a spontaneous idea struck her. She had been working long hours lately, and her family had grown used to her late returns. Perhaps tonight, she could surprise them, a home-cooked meal, a cozy evening together. It might be just what they needed to reconnect. Smiling at the thought, she decided to leave work early and spend the afternoon preparing James's favorite lasagna and Queen's favorite chocolate cake. The anticipation carried her through the day. By the time she pulled into the driveway, she felt a rare spark of excitement. Her family had no idea she was coming home early, and she relished the thought of their surprised faces. She grabbed the groceries and quietly entered the house, only to be met with an unsettling silence. Usually, the sound of the TV or Queen's music filled the air. Still smiling, Ruth climbed the stairs toward the bedrooms. She could never have imagined that within moments, her life would shatter into pieces. Ruth called out, "James." "Queen." Her voice echoed slightly in the quiet house, but there was no response. She shrugged off the unease, assuming they were both busy in their rooms, James likely working and Queen on one of her video calls. Wanting to surprise them, she climbed the stairs quietly. As she approached the hallway, a muffled sound reached her ears. She froze, straining to identify it. The sound came from her bedroom. Her stomach churned uneasily. Was James watching something inappropriate? Shaking her head to dismiss the thought, she walked closer. The bedroom door was slightly ajar. Peering inside, her world came crashing down. There, on the bed, were her husband and her daughter tangled together in a position that defied all logic, morality, and trust. For a moment, Ruth's mind refused to process what she was seeing. Her legs felt like lead, rooting her to the spot. Her heart thundered in her chest, and her breathing grew ragged. What is this?" she finally managed to scream, her voice cracking with a mix of fury and heartbreak. The sound startled both James and Queen, who scrambled off the bed, their faces pale with guilt and shock. "Ruth, wait. This isn't what it looks like," James stammered, his voice frantic. "Mom, I didn't mean," Queen's words trailed off, her eyes brimming with tears. Ruth couldn't hear them. Rage and betrayal consumed her. Without another word, she turned and fled the house, their frantic voices chasing her down the hallway. The life she had once thought steady and secure had just been obliterated. Ruth drove aimlessly for hours, her knuckles white against the steering wheel. Her mind replayed the horrifying scene over and over, each iteration sinking her deeper into despair. How could this have happened? How had she missed the signs? The questions gnawed at her, but no answers came. Eventually, she parked by the side of a quiet road. Resting her forehead against the steering wheel, her body shook with silent sobs. She didn't want to go home, not yet. The thought of facing James and Quinn again felt unbearable. Her family, once her sanctuary, had become a source of unbearable betrayal. In her desperation, she called Emma, her best friend. "Ruth, what's wrong?" Emma's voice was filled with concern the moment she answered. Ruth hesitated, the words catching in her throat. Finally, she whispered, "It's James and Quinn. I don't even know how to say this." The confession tumbled out in fragments, each word more shocking than the last. Emma gasped, her disbelief palpable. "Oh my God, Ruth, are you okay? You can't go back there, not until you figured out what to do." Ruth nodded to herself, taking comfort in Emma's unwavering support. After a few minutes of silence, Emma spoke again. "You need answers, Ruth. You need to confront them separately. Whatever this is, it can't stay in the dark." Hours later, Ruth found herself back at the house. The tension in the air was suffocating as she entered. James was waiting for her in the living room, his expression a mix of guilt and panic. Quinn sat on the stairs, her face tear-streaked, trembling like a child caught in a storm. "Start talking," Ruth demanded, her voice cold and steady. "Both of you. I want the truth." James tried to defend himself, claiming it was a moment of weakness and insisting it wasn't as bad as it looked. But Quinn interrupted him, her voice trembling. "No, Mom. He made me think it was normal. He told me not to tell you." Ruth's heart shattered all over again. The man she had trusted most in the world had not only betrayed her but manipulated her daughter. Fury coursed through her veins. "You will pay for this, James," she said, her voice low and resolute. "I promise you that." Ruth wasted no time. The moment she heard Quinn's trembling confession, she knew this was no longer just about betrayal. It was about protecting her daughter and seeking justice. The rage and heartbreak that consumed her crystallized into a singular purpose: to ensure James paid for his unforgivable actions. The next morning, Ruth contacted a lawyer. Sitting in the sterile office, she recounted the events of the previous day, her voice shaking with anger and pain. The lawyer listened attentively, nodding solemnly. "This is a serious case, Ruth," he said. "We need to involve the authorities immediately. Are you prepared for that?" She hesitated, not because she doubted her decision, but because of the emotional toll it would take on Quinn. After a deep breath, she nodded. "Do whatever needs to be done." The following days were a whirlwind. James was arrested after an investigation began, and the police interviewed both Ruth and Quinn. Reliving the events in detail during her statement was agonizing, but Ruth remained strong, knowing she had to stay composed for her daughter's sake. Quinn, on the other hand, was visibly shaken, struggling to come to terms with the trauma she had endured. The case quickly became the talk of their small community. Whispers and stares followed Ruth wherever she went. Some people expressed their support, while others cast judgment, questioning how she could have missed the signs. It stung, but Ruth remained resolute. "I will not let their opinions break me," she told herself. "This is about my daughter's safety, not their approval." Quinn began attending therapy, where she slowly started to open up about the manipulation and emotional abuse she had endured. The therapist reassured her that the blame lay entirely on James, helping her begin the journey toward healing. Meanwhile, Ruth worked with her lawyer to ensure the legal case was airtight. Evidence mounted against James, painting a clear picture of his manipulative actions. Court hearings were grueling, but Ruth faced them with unshakable determination, fueled by her love for Quinn and the desire for justice. When the verdict was finally delivered, James was sentenced to a significant prison time. While it didn't erase the trauma, it gave Ruth and Quinn a sense of closure. The man who had shattered their family would no longer have the power to harm them. In the aftermath of James's sentencing, the weight of everything that had happened began to settle over Ruth and Quinn like a dark cloud. Though James was no longer a part of their lives, the scars of his betrayal and manipulation lingered. Ruth struggled with an overwhelming sense of guilt. As a mother, she felt she had failed to protect Quinn from the very man she had trusted most. Every detail of the past replayed in her mind, moments when she had dismissed James's controlling behavior. Quinn's growing withdrawal was a behavior Ruth couldn't ignore. How did I not see it? She asked herself repeatedly, her guilt tightening its grip with every unanswered question. Quinn, too, was burdened with shame and confusion. She couldn't help but blame herself, even though her therapist reassured her time and time again that she had been manipulated. "I should have told you sooner, Mom," Quinn said one night, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe this wouldn't have gone so far." Ruth held her tightly, her own tears falling freely. "None of this is your fault, Quinn. He's the one who broke us, not you." It was a moment of shared pain but also a glimmer of healing and acknowledgement that they were in this together. Emma, Ruth's best friend, became a lifeline during this dark period. She would visit almost daily, bringing meals, helping with household tasks, and offering a shoulder to lean on. "You're stronger than you think, Ruth," Emma reminded her constantly. "You've already done the hardest part, standing up for yourself and Quinn." But the road to recovery was anything but linear. Quinn's nightmares were frequent, and Ruth's own insomnia grew worse as she stayed awake worrying about the future. Their lives felt like a fragile balancing act, teetering on the edge of despair. Amid the struggle, there were small victories. Therapy sessions started to help both mother and daughter process their emotions. Quinn began to reconnect with her friends, regaining a sense of normalcy. Ruth, too, found moments of solace in journaling and long walks, slowly rediscovering pieces of herself that had been lost in the chaos. Though the pain remained, they were beginning to see glimpses of light at the end of the tunnel, a reminder that healing, though slow, was possible. Ruth knew that healing wouldn't come overnight, but she was determined to create a new life for herself and Quinn, a life where they could both feel safe and begin to mend their broken hearts. The first step was leaving the house that held too many painful memories. Packing up their belongings was bittersweet, as each item carried reminders of happier times that now felt tainted. But Ruth reminded herself that this was a chance for a fresh start. She found a small but cozy apartment across town, far from the neighborhood where whispers and judgments had followed them. "This is our new beginning," she told Quinn as they unpacked boxes together. Quinn's therapy sessions became a cornerstone of their healing journey. Slowly but surely, she started to open up about her feelings of shame and guilt. Her therapist introduced her to mindfulness techniques, helping her manage her anxiety and regain a sense of control over her life. "You're not responsible for what happened," the therapist reminded her often. "The blame lies entirely with him." Meanwhile, Ruth began attending a support group for survivors of abuse and betrayal. Hearing the stories of others who had faced similar struggles gave her strength and a sense of community. She shared her own story hesitantly at first but found that voicing her pain helped lighten the burden. "You're not alone," one group member told her, "and you're doing everything right by being here." At home, Ruth and Quinn started to rediscover their bond. They introduced small rituals into their daily routine, cooking dinner together, watching movies, and taking walks in the park. These moments, though simple, reminded them of the love and resilience they still shared. Financially, the transition was challenging, but Ruth found strength in her work. She took on extra hours, channeling her energy into providing for Quinn and proving to herself that she could rebuild their lives on her own. Emma continued to be a constant presence, helping wherever she could and reminding Ruth of her progress. "You've come so far," Emma said one day. "You're stronger than you give yourself credit for." Though the scars of the past hadn't disappeared, Ruth and Quinn were no longer defined by them. They were moving forward, one step at a time. Moving forward step by step toward a future where pain didn't overshadow their joy. Months passed, and though the road had been long and difficult, Ruth and Quinn began to see the faint glow of hope on the horizon. Their new apartment, once a stark reminder of their broken past, had slowly transformed into a warm, inviting home. The walls now carried the echoes of laughter, not sorrow, and the future felt less like an enemy and more like an opportunity. Ruth had found a rhythm in her new life. The support group meetings became a cherished part of her week, and she was growing more confident in her ability to provide for Quinn. Her work, once just a source of income, became a symbol of her independence. For the first time in a long while, Ruth felt proud of herself, not just for surviving but for thriving despite everything. Quinn, too, was finding her footing. Therapy had helped her understand that she wasn't to blame for what had happened, and she was slowly rebuilding her self-esteem. She reconnected with her friends and even joined an art class where she found an outlet for her emotions. One evening, she showed Ruth a painting she had created, a vibrant landscape of a sunrise. "It's about moving forward," Quinn said, her voice steady and full of conviction. Their bond, once strained by the weight of betrayal, had become stronger than ever. They shared more open conversations, supporting each other through the ups and downs. Ruth marveled at Quinn's resilience and often found strength in her daughter's determination. One afternoon, as they sat together on the couch watching an old movie, Quinn turned to Ruth and said, "Mom, I'm proud of us. We didn't let him break us." Ruth smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "No, we didn't, and we never will." Though the scars of the past would never fully fade, they no longer defined their lives. Ruth and Quinn had found a way to reclaim their story, turning pain into strength and rebuilding a future they could face together. They knew challenges would come, but as long as they had each other, they could overcome anything. Ruth turned to Quinn, a warm sense of peace washing over her, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Their journey had been harrowing, filled with pain and resilience, but they had made it through together. Stronger, braver, and more determined than ever, they were ready to step boldly into a new chapter of their lives. Moral of the story: life's challenges may test our spirit, but they also reveal our strength. With courage, support, and determination, even the darkest moments can lead to new beginnings. Please share, like, and subscribe to Neji Trends TV for more stories. Bye for now.